Hey guys, it's Mike, your host of Crushing Your Fear, podcast that addresses fear. We talk to really great people who have gone through, troubles in their lives, who are helping others with fear, with a lot of other things as well. But we're focusing in on fear. And this week we have Ryan Michler, who is host of the Order of Man podcast and also founder Order Man. I'm involved with this Iron Council. It's a group of men, and we just address issues, around men and society. And it's just a fantastic thing. It's helped me out tremendously. And I've asked him to be on, and he said yes, he'd be honored. I'd be like, whoa, holy cow. So I had Ryan on, and we had a great conversation. So here it is. And we are here with Ryan Michler, the founder of Order of Man. And I'm a member of the Iron Council, and he has an excellent podcast, millions of downloads, and just fantastic experience. And he agreed to be on the show. How are you doing, Ryan?
Good, man. Glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate it. Now, you just moved up to Maine, I guess, from Utah?
Yeah, I moved here about 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks, so trying to get settled in and adjusted, but it's been a good move so far for me and my family.
That's cool. I'm glad everything works out. Well, you got to wait for the winter to come.
Yeah, it's easy now because it's, beautiful, but yeah, the winter might be a different story for sure.
It might be a different story, but it's an awesome area. The people here are fantastic. But I'm glad you came on. I wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much. I was in a dark place about a year ago. My whole life was kind of falling apart, and I found your podcast, and I listened to all the episodes, from recent all the way back to number one, and you really, gave me a lot of inspiration to get out of that element of fear, element of like, geez, what's going to happen next? My life's over.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you've done with Order Man and Iron Council, which I'm a member of that Team Velocity, which is fantastic. They're great bunch of guys. But let's talk about what you're doing now. You founded the Order of Man, and what's happening with that. You have a podcast. You've had a lot of tremendous people on your show, like Ed Milet, Andy Frisella, Grant Cardone, Jocko, awesome people.
Yeah, we've had some great guests for sure.
So maybe you can go through that, your background, and try to tell the listeners a little bit about you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how far you want to go back necessarily, but I think a lot of this really started from the time I was little, and I wondered why I went through a lot of the experiences that I did as I was young, mostly, not having a stable father figure in my life. My dad left by the time I was 3 when he was out of the picture, and I had some other stepfathers come into my life who were less than stellar examples of what it meant to be a man.
Yeah.
And, I wondered for a lot of years why I went through that. I had a lot of dark times during that time. My mom was always there and present and available. But, as a woman, there's only so much that she can do to raise a boy. And she recognized that. So she got me involved in competitive sports and Boy Scouts and other organizations that were able to put me around other good men who wanted me to succeed. And I had a lot of positive role models that way. But yeah, man, just went throughout my life doing my thing. And about 10 years ago, my wife and I actually went through a separation. There's a lot of reasons for that, but ultimately I just wasn't showing up the way that I was capable of showing up. And it was really a catalyst moment for me, and it really helped me see that part of the reason I don't like to blame it on that so much, but part of the reason that I struggled so much was because I didn't have that example. So I really went to work on myself, and over the course of 3, 4, 5 months, and even 10 years later, I'm still working on myself. But through that work, I've been able to salvage my marriage, and we've got a happy marriage, of course, and kids, and just moved here to Maine. So it's a lot of good stuff going on. But I started an organization about 4 years ago with the goal of helping men with the tools and conversations and resources that I needed and that I used to improve my life. So that's where we're at now, 4 years later, reaching millions and millions of guys and having tremendous impact. It's been really, really rewarding.
Yeah. Now how many downloads do you have? You're talking millions, like for your podcast?
Oh yeah. I think we're at, maybe a little over 13 million or so, maybe 14 million now. It's crazy. It's really, really taken off.
Is that total or?
Yeah, total. We get a little over 1 million downloads a month, so it's just
Whoa,
exponentially increased over, like I said, the last 4 years.
my
So we
God.
continue to see growth, and it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah, I'm just starting out my other podcast as well, the Craft Beer Storm, and this one is brand new as well. So we're trying to
Yeah.
get some traction on that. But I mean, you just got to do it for a long time, and it's
Yeah,
just
you have to be consistent with it, and then evaluate too. Is like, okay, well, you're doing this podcast. Is it the best that you can do? How do you continue to level it up? How do you improve the audio? How do you improve the caliber of guests that are coming on? How do you improve your skills and abilities as an interviewer and a podcaster? So
Right.
through that evaluation and consistency, you create something that you never would have dreamed possible. It's pretty incredible, actually, and
It's
a little surreal
unbelievable.
as well.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I started listening to you last year, but that's 14 million downloads. It's crazy.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
great. It's excellent. I mean, you're doing the job, and you're working very hard at it, and it shows, and you're getting rewarded. So it's cool.
yeah.
But
Much appreciated.
yeah, topics like I sent you a bunch of topics, but I think what the main people fear arises is like what others think. What do other people think about it? Like, I can't do that because what would they think about it? And so, I mean, my personal opinion is like, who cares? That's what I hear.
Well, yeah. I mean, who cares? But also, like, that's like easy to say, right? But then it's something that a lot of us we fall into the trap of anyways. Like it's easy to say that. Who cares? And because we know that's what it should be, and yet simultaneously, as you say, who cares? You're still thinking about what people care about and what they think about you, right? So
Yeah.
like, well, how do you actually do this? Overcome what people think of you? And I think the best thing I thought is that until somebody's willing to pay my bills and ensure that I'm satisfied and fulfilled and achieving my objectives and my goals and taking care of my family, then it's really not a matter of what those people think. But I also think it could be unhealthy to be so extreme in the thoughts of what do other people think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's right either,
Mm-hmm.
that you shouldn't care what anybody thinks. I think there's a balance, and that balance is finding people that you aspire to be like, that you're inspired by, that are doing things that you want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably ought to care to a degree what those people think. And also the people you have an obligation for. Like, I care about what my wife thinks because
Mm-hmm.
she's impacted by my decisions and I'm impacted by hers. I care what my kids think about me because I'm trying to lead and influence them. So I think if we take it too far to the extreme, it's a little delusional and it's not going to serve us best, but rather finding that balance and where it's appropriate to care and consider what other people think of you and where it's not. That's a healthier approach.
Right.
And a much more realistic, pragmatic approach as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be my, obviously, if you have your loved ones and your people close to you, you have to understand and you have to worry about what they think or what they need, right? You can't just dismiss them. However, it's like peripheral people or like, friends or, acquaintances and like, what would they think or what would the people down the street think? I mean, when I'm when I get in a pickle like that or just, thinking about that, I'm like, well, does it really matter what they think? Like not close people, just kind of peripheral people or society, like in general, right? Like you can't do that. Like the people say you can't do that. I'm like, why not? Let me try. If I don't, then at least I tried, right? I'm in the same place.
Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly think it's a danger to accept society's standards as your own. Like it's kind of that Pareto Principle where if you don't know the principle, it's 20% of the results come from roughly 80% of the people, or 20% of the guys get the 80% of women, or 20% of the population makes 80% of the wealth. This is the Pareto Principle, right? And so, you've got to focus on what is actually going to produce results, and you've really got to focus on the 20% of people that you really want to serve and you really want to care about, and let the other 80% that are frankly irrelevant, that aren't producing any results, that aren't helping you in your life at all.
Right.
You gotta let that stuff go. But yeah, it's a danger to subscribe to society standards. Like 80% of the people are unproductive. 80% of the people are dissatisfied and miserable. 80% of the people are making less than what they're capable of. 80% of the people are probably in unhealthy and toxic relationships. So do we really want to take the 80% and apply that to our life when we're trying to be the 10 or the 20 or the 5 or 1% of people? No, I mean, it's a danger, and you got to be careful of that.
Absolutely. Not conforming, and societal, conforming with society and what's expected of you, and your parents were a certain, or like last night I was driving Uber now, so I'm trying to make some money, but I had a guy in my car, and I'm like, all right, well, like, what do you do? And he's like, well, I'm going to school, pharmacology. I'm like, oh, how's it going? He's like, it's okay. And I'm like, well, do you like to do it? And he's like, no, I don't like it at all. I'm like, well, why are you doing it? And he's like, well, my aunt and uncle, do it, and they told me I should do this. I'm like, yeah, right. They're telling this kid what to do. He doesn't want to do it. They've wasted so much time and money and energy because he's
and it's not his aunt and uncle's fault. I mean, they're probably coming from a position of love. Like, hey, we want you to be successful. This has worked for us, and here's how we've created the kind of life that we're proud of, and that we're happy with. So that it's not deceitful or devious or misguided.
No, of course, they just want to. They see what worked for them, and then they want to, right? Because they care about him, right? Their family, but
so this is his fault, and that's the point that I'm making. Is and that sounds harsh, and people don't like when I say that. But look, if you're in a position that you aren't satisfied with, whether it's a relationship or your job or your level of wealth or your fitness and your health goals, then that's your fault. That's your fault. And people will say, well, I have a health condition. Okay, well, I just talked with a guy that was born without any limbs, and yet he's an extremely successful entrepreneur. He's extremely well-spoken. He's a very highly sought-after public speaker. Right. And so what's your problem?
Right. Exactly.
Or I wasn't born with the same opportunities as you. It's like, look around. I mean, look how many opportunities are around us. And if one person has done it, that means it's possible. So stop making excuses for it and realize that everything that you've, once you're an adult, I should say, everything that you've created in your life, the circumstances in which you find yourself are a result of your actions and your behaviors and your thoughts. You don't like it, change those things.
Exactly. And blaming others and blaming society or blaming whoever.
Right.
For your
what's the value in that?
Yeah.
And even if there is some level of obligation or responsibility on the part of somebody else, like your boss, for example, or a spouse or whatever you conjure up. Okay, well, what's the value in that? Like, what's the value in saying it's my wife's job to make me happy? What's the value to me in saying that it's my employer's job to make sure that I have a job? What's the value in saying that it's the president's job or Congress's job to ensure that the economy, or that I personally am making enough money and that I have this minimum standard of living? Like, there's no value in that. It doesn't move you towards anything worthwhile. It moves you away from it, and it causes a lot of complacency and passivity, when what we should be doing is rising to the occasion and being assertive in our life and taking control of what we have control over.
Exactly. Yes. And that leads me into the maybe the fear of failure. Like, people don't want to take that next step. They don't want to go out there on a limb. They have an idea. They don't want to go out and say, hey, I'm going to, geniuses in the past, like Edison or Ford, Henry Ford, they laughed at him, right? Like, I said, I'm gonna do an automobile. I'm gonna do it. And people
I don't know that people are afraid of fear, though, or failure, I should say. I don't think that's it. I really don't, because, and here's why. When you were a kid and you were learning to walk, you fell thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Mm-hmm. You weren't afraid of getting back up and trying because you might not get it this time. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's inherently that we're afraid of these things. It's that we're afraid of the judgment that comes with it.
Right. Right.
Nobody, like, if nobody was watching you, let's say you were, I don't know, whatever, you wanted to run a marathon and nobody was there and nobody was watching you. Would you be afraid to fail? No, you wouldn't be afraid to fail. You'd go try it. Mm-hmm. So that means that the reason you're afraid to fail is because you're concerned with what other people will think of that failure.
And that goes
we
back
see it in
to
little kids. Mm-hmm. The only time, or I should say the time in their life where they start getting concerned and not growing as much as they once did, is when they're aware of the fact that other people are watching them and that other people will mock and ridicule and make fun of them.
Right.
So it feels uncomfortable. They don't want to be ostracized from the group, and that's the primal fear.
Right.
The primal fear is not that I'll fail, it's that I'll be ostracized from the group I care about. But here's the deal. If you find the right people, the people that genuinely care about you, that want you to push, that are pushing themselves, they're not going to ostracize you. They're going to encourage you.
Right.
They're going to ask that you push harder than you did before. So it's not a matter of fear of failure. It's fear of the ridicule that potentially comes with it, which is an indicator that maybe you're not in the right circle of friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't think of anybody who I've been deliberate and intentional about surrounding myself with, like any of these guys, for example, that you mentioned on the podcast,
right?
Who are high achieving men who, if I told any of these guys, like Andy Frisella, he's grown to be a friend. If I told him, hey, Andy, I tried this thing and I failed, like, he's not going to make fun of me, right? He's going to say, dude, that's awesome. What'd you learn?
Yeah.
What could you do better next time? Oh, here's a thought for you. And so this is somebody who's not worried about making fun of me. This is somebody that sees the value in trying. If you surround yourself with enough of those people, you'll never have the fear of ridicule or failure or whatever we want to dub it as. That won't be a concern of yours, and you'll take the action required. I think there's another thing that you can do too, which is to reframe what failure is. See, most people think failure is I try this thing, this activity, and I don't accomplish that activity, and that means I failed. And while, yes, it certainly means you didn't achieve the objective, I choose to look at failure differently. I personally choose to look at it and think that the only failure is not acting upon an idea or a thought that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want to fail, so therefore, if I define it as not acting upon those things, then I'm driven to act upon those things.
Yeah.
So redefining it, finding the right people in your life, these are great ways to inoculate yourself against something that's completely natural and primal. It's been ingrained into us for tens of thousands of years. You got to find little tricks and tips to be able to overcome some of that stuff.
Absolutely, and I agree with you 100% about finding a circle of people to surround yourself that will look like what Andy did, right? What did you learn from it?
Right.
What could you do differently and not just mock you? I mean, if you have friends that do that, mock you or talk about you, I mean, just get rid of them because they're not really they're not serving you. I love that term, serving. Ed Milet uses it a lot. Does it really serve you? Do these people add anything to your life, or they're just there peripheral nonsense, right? Get rid of them. And,
well, what I think there's two types of people.
Yeah.
There's people who produce more than they consume, and there's people who consume more than they produce. So if you want to be valuable, look, we all consume, right?
Yeah.
Just by our very nature, we're going to have dinner tonight. That's consuming. That's consumption. At some point, you had to provide that food, whether you went out and hunted it for yourself or you bought it at the grocery store because you developed another set of skills that gives you money, and then you can go buy it. That's production. You're producing. So you want to be around people who produce more than they consume.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that? Because they're productive. Because they add value to their own lives. They are valued. They are earning money. They do have the spoils of war, if you will. That's how you know. They have those things. They have abundance. They believe in production, and they're rewarded for it. But if you have other people who are consume, take, steal, lie, cheat, steal, whatever I need to do to get, I got to get mine. That's a pretty good indicator that you have somebody who is a consumer of resources, including your time and attention and energy.
Absolutely.
And you better be very, very careful with that.
Absolutely. Your time. I hate when people waste my time. It's just unbelievable.
Well, it's that, and they're not doing it. They're not doing it to get you. They're not even. They don't even think about it.
No.
You're not even an afterthought because they're in consumption mode.
That's right. They're focused on themselves.
But it's your job to recognize it. It's not their fault if you allow yourself to be abused.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. It's your fault. It's that whole what is it, Aesop's fable or whatever it is, where and I'm going to butcher this, but this boy finds a wounded snake by the river, and the snake says, I want to get across the river. And he says, no, I'm not picking you up. You're a snake. And he's like, I promise, if you just pick me up, I'm not going to bite you. I'm wounded. I got to get across the river. I got to get back. And the boy says, no, I'm not going to do that. Finally, the snake convinces him to pick him up. And so the boy picks him up, and he starts carrying him across the river. And the snake says, I'm cold. I'm cold. I'm cold. I'm cold. Just put me inside of your jacket. And the boy's like, no, you're a snake. You're going to bite me. He's like, no, I'm not going to bite you. I'm just cold. I'm injured. I got to get across the river. And eventually he convinces him to get him across the river. Or to put him in his coat and get him across the river. So the boy and the snake get across the river, and before the boy can put the snake down, the snake bites him. And the boy looks down. He's like, hey, I did everything you told me. Like, I got you across the river. I put you in here so you weren't cold. Like, why would you bite me? He says, you knew what I was when you picked me up, and you still picked me up.
Yeah.
And how often do we do that as individuals? Like, we know when people are abusing our time or attention or resources or energy, and yet we continue to pick these people up and let them do what they want to do. That's not the snake's fault. The snake is the snake. That's your fault for not acknowledging it or listening to yourself or your intuition to leave the snake alone.
Exactly. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
It sounds silly when you say it in a story like that, but if you were to inventory your life, how often have you continued to pick the snake up? And the snake could come in many forms. Snake could come in the form of an individual who's taking advantage of you, could come in the form of some sort of vice like pornography or drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
Like you're abusing those things. That's a snake. Leave it alone. It's not good for you.
No. Wow.
And it actually encourages the current pattern of potentially mediocrity and not facing your fears and not moving forward because you're sedating yourself. So rather than facing the fear of, hey, I got to ask this woman on a date, or I've got to ask for this promotion, or I've had this business idea, rather than actually addressing that like an adult, you choose to medicate yourself through drugs, pornography, alcohol, self-abuse, abuse at the hands of another person, so that you can use those as excuses not to overcome your fear. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. And you talk about that. There's another bullet that's not on this list about bullying. Like people, when I was bullied when I was a kid. There's some idiots who, and I guess every kid has gotten bullied, but just scared of them. And now I find as an adult, I see some other adults like trying to bully me, or like I owe this bank money, or we have other individuals in our lives that, threaten us and stuff like that. I mean, how do you handle that? Like, because fear arises when that happens. Actually, it's horrible. I have a good immune system, right? I have a pretty good immune system. I was getting this stress-induced eczema. I don't know if you heard of it. It's out of control. Like, I'm like, what is happening? What is happening to my body? I went to a dermatologist like 3 times, and she's like, all right, let me take a biopsy. It's like stress-induced eczema. And it was from these people. So I've learned to kind of just address it and just see them as just outside noise. But how do you handle that? Like in terms of, because adults have bullies too. Maybe there's a boss, maybe there's a wife or a husband that's just, I mean, how do they handle that?
Yeah, and I want to be clear when I talk about this as well, is there's varying degrees of bullying, right? Like not everything's bullying. Sometimes it's just you're being picked on or whatever, and that's not like necessarily bullying, right? Yeah. But it could go as far as abuse, like physical or mental or emotional or sexual abuse. Yeah. That's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That's your fault. The snake is the snake. Like you're not going to change the snake. Yeah. Right. So we have all these sorts of initiatives with children, like no bullying in schools and all these little fancy programs with clever catch titles and catch names and whatever. You're not going to change the snake. Stop trying to change the snake. Right. Instead, change yourself. Uh-huh. If you change yourself, you don't tolerate that behavior anymore. Okay. You don't tolerate anybody stepping on you or over you. Mm-hmm. So first, it comes with a level of courage. That's the very first step. It's not confidence, right? Because how can you be confident in something that you're not confident in, right? That's the conundrum. Yeah. You can't. You have to earn it. And confidence, I heard just the other day, is a skill set. It means it can be developed. So the first step is to develop some level of courage, So when you have somebody who steps on your toes or mocks or ridicules you or tries to undermine your authority, your credibility, or whatever it may be, the first step is to display courage by addressing it. Hey, I don't appreciate when you do that, because when you do that, you're undermining my authority, and this is not how this works. That's pretty bold.
Just pretty point blank, yeah.
That's pretty bold. That's a hard thing to do. It's easy for those who have practiced that. Like I would have no problem telling that to somebody because I've practiced it.
Uh-huh.
But the very first time you need to display some level of courage and say that to an individual, that's a very difficult thing to do. So you have to know what you want, know what you stand for. Now you start developing some courage. So you build up the courage. And then the other thing you need is some level of competency. So as you're displaying courage in addressing this and bringing this up with individuals, you have to have some level of competency towards something that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you aren't competent, it's going to be harder to be courageous about that thing, because you're basically speaking out of your ass.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know what you're talking about because you have some level of competency, that gives you the fuel that you need to exhibit more courage.
Mm-hmm.
And as you exhibit more courage and you build up more competency, the reward is the confidence to be able to do it again. It's all on a cycle. It's not linear. It's cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
So competency, courage, and then the confidence. The confidence will then foster more courage, which will give you the fuel that you need to develop more competency in said skill set, which will develop more confidence, and on and on and on.
It's just standing
your ground. If you had a specific
ground,
example, I could give you a specific solution, but generally speaking, that's the requirement. That's the formula.
That's yeah, but it makes a lot of sense. It's just standing up and just being courageous and just saying, "Hey,
that is."
That's not.
And
cool.
Here's the thing: is everybody can exhibit courage. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Right. You're in a moment, and you decide in this moment. You make a conscious decision. I am going to retreat and withdraw and slink into my corner like I always have, or I'm going to stand up for myself because I value myself, because I honor myself, because I care about what I'm producing. And so you make the decision, the conscious decision, to act with courage in the face of what I understand is really scary at times. Even if it's simple as a small little interaction that might be seemingly insignificant. In fact, I would say that's where you start. Mm-hmm. And here's how you'll know is you'll begin when you want to display this level of courage, you'll say to yourself, well, yeah, this person slighted me, but they're probably having a bad day, or they probably didn't mean it. Oh, I'm just reading into it. They didn't mean it. No, it doesn't matter if they meant it or not. The way that you interpret it is the way that you interpreted it. Now stand up and be courageous. You can do it tactfully, but be courageous and be bold. Hey, I interpreted when you said this. Here's how I took this. Please help me understand. That person might say, oh, you misunderstood. Here's what I meant. Okay, good. We're clear. Or no, that's exactly what I meant. Good. Well, I don't appreciate that because X, Y, and Z. But it's those things that seem insignificant that you actually probably ought to stand up for. That's how you build this up.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Courage is the first step.
Yeah.
Courage is the first step.
It is, because it's the one that requires the least, not least effort, just the least amount of resources, right? It takes time to be competent. It takes time to develop a level of confidence. But courage is just a decision that can be made in any given moment.
It's all you, yeah. So it's all rests on you. Going back to that, it's all your fault.
And the longer you wait, the harder it gets, right? Because you start justifying it, you start rationalizing it, you start getting into these what we call cognitive distortions, which are distorting the reality of the situation to make it worse than it probably is. Like, have you ever actually had a confrontation with somebody and you had the confrontation, you had the conversation, and then when it was done, you're like, oh, well, that wasn't so hard.
Yeah.
That's because we as humans have these conditions, we call them cognitive distortions, where we start thinking about worst case scenario. It's a defense mechanism designed to keep us alive, frankly. And so we play out these strategies or these scenarios in our head and we make them significantly worse than they were. And when you actually go address it, you realize, oh, I was playing that game in my mind the whole time. I used to do this a lot. Specifically when I was going through my separation with my wife. There was things that she would either say or do or little circumstances where I would play it. I'm like, oh, she's leaving. Like, she's done. She's finally going to ask me for a divorce, and she hates me because of whatever. And it was some little insignificant detail, but I played it up in my mind and I made it real. I made it reality through my own actions. It was self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
So I think anybody who has some level of fear really ought to begin to understand cognitive distortions, because knowing it is the first step to overcoming it.
Well, that's what the acronym, the fear, is false events appearing real.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're describing there, just creating things.
Well, and let's say this too. Let's throw this caveat in here, because it's not always so black and white, right? So it's either false evidence appearing real, cognitive distortions, or it actually is real, like the snake.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I'm afraid of that snake is because if he bites me, I'm going to die. That's not false evidence. That's real.
Oh, that's real.
A
yeah.
real threat.
Yeah, that's real.
So what you need to do is you need to evaluate your fear, right? So if you're afraid of doing something, what you need to ask yourself is this fear warning me from something that is actually life-threatening, or is it simply something that's telling me that I'm about to step outside of my comfort zone?
Huh.
When you answer that, then you can act accordingly. Because I don't think your mind can distinguish between, hey, I just want you to be comfortable and I want you to stay alive. I think they're very, very closely related and connected. And so the mind has a difficult time separating the two, unless you're conscious about it, unless you think about it. And when you think about it and you give a face to it, and you start asking yourself those questions, you realize, yeah, this isn't going to kill me. It's just going to make me uncomfortable. But that uncomfortableness is going to create something new opportunities, new growth, new capabilities for myself.
Mm-hmm. New strength.
Yeah. New courage, right?
New courage. And, it's ingrained in us because the fear, the fight or flight thing, with the saber-toothed tigers and, with the cavemen around, they're like, we're not going to say, hey, nice cat, you're going to run because that thing's going to eat you.
Right.
Or the snake, like you pick up a snake. Well, that thing's going to bite you,
Right.
So in that case, that it's justified and it's a protection mechanism, Yeah,
it's a good thing. We've been evolving for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. It's not something we should overlook or pretend doesn't exist. We just need to evaluate it. Is this still true? Is this still relevant in my individual life and circumstances?
Right.
Be aware of it. That's what's so great about being a human being, is that we're conscious.
Right.
Meaning we can project ourselves out into some future place, in some future scenario, future time, backwards, forwards, different events happening, transpiring. And we can think about it consciously, looking back and projecting ourselves to some other place in time. That's something unique to humans, and it's pretty powerful. We ought to exercise that level of consciousness a little bit more.
I think so. A lot of people dwell in the past and what happened in the past, and because it happened once in the past, it's going to happen again. So,
yeah, I was in the financial planning business for a long time, and one of the disclaimers that we'd always have to throw on investment portfolios is past performance is not indicative of future results.
Right, that's right.
Right. Now, sometimes that's true, sometimes it isn't. But the past is a pretty good indicator. A lot of people say, oh, you should never look back, never revisit your past. Really? I think you should. Only as an indicator to propel you forward. Hey, last time I made this decision and it didn't go well. So what's a different decision that I can make this time?
Right.
That's a positive use of past events. Probably ought to look backwards only to determine future behavior.
Right. So
that's why I really believe in the after action review. I know you and I have talked about it just through the Iron Council, but that's a process that I use to ensure that we're moving forward, that we're learning and growing from all experiences that we have.
Right. No, I mean, the past, what's the phrase? Those do not learn from history are condemned to repeat it, I guess, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
That's, it's true.
Yeah.
But when you let the past hold you back from going forward, right? You look at the past and, all right, what did I do wrong? What can I do better? And move forward. But if in the past you have like a bad event and you're like, oh man, I can't do that again. I can't try that again because then I'll just fail. Like if you set up a business or something and it doesn't go well and it fails, what does that mean?
Then
you're
stuck in the past.
Then you're stuck in the past, like the guy in the Napoleon Dynamite movie. The one you can't...
Right. Go back and take state. No doubt in my mind, Mr. Uncle Rico.
Uncle Rico.
No, that's right. And so what you're doing when you do that is let's just use an example, like asking a woman on a date.
Yeah.
So you ask this woman out, she rejects you, she turns you down, and then you see another attractive woman a month later, and you think, well, I'd really like to ask her out, and you think about what happened last time, and instead of saying, okay, how can I approach this differently? What can I learn from this? So I'm propelling myself forward. You get stuck and you say, well, this last woman rejected me, so she'll probably reject me too. And so you base all behaviors on what happened in the past instead of thinking about how you can improve it or do it differently. Maybe it was just the way that you asked. Maybe you were too aggressive. Maybe you were too passive. Maybe there just wasn't a level of interest. But it was an isolated incident. It wasn't an indicator of the trends of your life.
Uh-huh.
We've got to compartmentalize these micro failures as just that. Like I'm not a failure. I just happened to fail in that particular moment. There's a lot of variables and reasons for that failure. I just got to figure out which one it is and then adjust accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's looking at the past is only good if it's projecting you forward. If you're defining yourself by your past mistakes and your past behaviors, then yeah, it's probably going to keep you hindered and keep you small and keep you trapped where you currently are.
Which is not good. No,
I don't think anybody wants to stay where they are.
No,
I think it's a human condition to grow.
Yeah. You have to
have a desire to grow
and look back, and you don't want to be the same person you were a year ago. You want to be the new and improved. Moving forward towards a goal.
This is why those people who are so afraid of taking steps feel so much shame and guilt about it, because they want to progress and they can't. They can't get over themselves enough to progress, and so there's an integrity gap, is what I call it. The integrity gap is the gap between what you know you should be doing and what you're actually doing. And the greater that gap, the more guilt and fear and remorse and contention and bitterness and potentially resentment there is in your life towards yourself, because you know you should and yet you aren't.
Yeah.
So our job is to bridge the integrity gap. What do I know I should be doing? And am I taking the actions that align me with that goal?
Mm-hmm.
The closer those two things are aligned, the more fulfillment and happiness and joy you're going to have in your life.
Right. Wow. This is all good stuff, Ryan.
Good
stuff, man. Good stuff. So listen, I want to let you go. I know you've been on for a while, and how can people get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of Order of Man? And I think you're on Facebook and you have a website. And
yeah, orderofman.com is our website. If you're into podcasting, Order of Man, whether it's Stitcher or iTunes or SoundCloud or Pandora, wherever you're listening, just search Order of Man. And then I'm very active on Instagram and Twitter, both at Ryan Michler. My last name is Michler. So you can find us at any one of those places.
Yeah, awesome stuff, Ryan. And again, thank you for everything you've done for me. I know this is the first time we spoke, but I feel like I know you.
Yeah,
and now you're in Maine, so I want to come up and visit and have some coffee or something. Where are you in Maine anyway?
We're about an hour north of Portland.
Oh boy, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get up there. There's some breweries up there. Maybe I'll come visit.
Yeah, let me know, man. We'll make it happen.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you being on. It means the world to me. I appreciate everything you do. And, thank you.
You bet.
Thanks for being
Happy
on.
to help.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, that was Ryan Michler. Man, Order of Man podcast, Iron Council website, orderman.com. He's on Facebook. Man, a lot of information. He's had tremendous people on his podcast. He had, Ed Milet, Andy Frisilla, Grant Cardone, Jocko, tremendous people. And he is a wealth of information, as you just heard, how to address fear and how to look at things differently. The fable about the snake. I mean, we have a lot of snakes in our lives, right? But we keep going back to them, whether it's an addiction to something or it's a person. It's a snake, What do you expect? It's going to bite you? What do you expect? So look at that stuff and address it. And if it doesn't serve you, I love that term, serving. Does it serve you? If it doesn't serve you, get rid of it, right? You have people around you that are just, critical, mock you, trash your ideas. Get rid of them and surround yourself with people who are going to promote you. Be positive, right? That's what you need to do. You got an idea, go with it, run with it. I picked up the guy last night in Uber. I felt so bad for him. He's like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, man, he's wasting so much time. And that's what we all do when we let fear ruin our lives, rule our lives, and we just got to address it and kick it in the butt and crush it. Crush fear. Crush your fear. And that's why I started this. So, if you like our podcast, you like what we're doing, you like our guest, Ryan Michler, freaking awesome, stellar guest. We're going to get more on. I'm approaching others. I'm going for it. And if you like our podcast, go on to iTunes. Give us a rating and review. We would love to hear from you. If you want to have certain guests on, if you got connections for me, get them on. Can address fear. If you yourself have an excellent story you want to share with others, reach me, Michael@crushingyourfear.com. Reach out to me, man. I love to have you on, or woman. This is all not, but we did order man, but it's not just for men. It's for everybody, men and women. And you can take Ryan's advice and apply it to anybody, a human being, right? And take care of stuff. So that's what we have for today. I will continue to get the great guests on, and I need you to keep listening. Tell a friend, tell 10 friends with 10X here. I got my other podcast, Craft Beer Storm. If you like craft beer, we have a brewery in Portsmouth, Bear Brewing Company. Come on and visit if you're in Portsmouth, New Hampshire or near. All right, guys, I hope I helped you, and I wish you well. Take care.